welcome to the Romanova Music channel. This is going to be the first ever Romanova Rant video. Now, I'm basically just going to take a subject and I'm going to rant about it for however long I please. Alright, I'm going to try to keep it short, try to keep these succinct, because when you rant, you know, you could easily go way too far with your rants. But maybe that's part of the fun. Who knows? You'll have to stick around. Maybe like and subscribe and comment on the channel, why don't you? Help me out in the algorithm here. So, today I decided I was going to talk about the idea of genres, musical genres. We all know what they are. We see them every single day. In the present, it comes to us in the form of Spotify, correct? You get on your Spotify profile, you look around, it just says genres right on there. Boom. What to listen to. And it separates them all out. Rock, pop, hip-hop, R&B, East Indian, blah blah, poo-poo, pa-pa, poo-poo, pa-pa, da-da-da. All these different things. Bing-bong, ding-dong, everything you can imagine, right? That's what it tells you. It basically says here, this might be something you want to listen to based on your own preconceived notions of what you're going to hear. Okay, now, I'm basically going to break down why mainstream music in this era kind of sucks. You have to admit it. You have to admit it. You put the radio on, it's either the same old songs you've heard over and over and over and over again, or it's a new band or a new artist that just, take it or leave it, you know? At least anybody who plays music or, you know, has a guitar in their hand is definitely thinking this at some point or another. I noticed musicians at a higher caliber, they sort of, we think differently, all right? People who've been playing music for a long time, it's not like the average person, the average Joe. But this could also, this video can kind of describe certain feelings that the average Joe might have as well, or the average Jane, to be perfectly equitable here. Now, mainstream music, why does it suck? Why does it just feel devoid of something? What's that missing element, right? Well, I'm going to tell you, it's not what's missing, it's about how it's approached. It's about how you are fed music, how you are spoon-fed all of this music that you listen to. And it starts with the idea of a genre, which I believe genre is simply a marketing tool, nothing else. It's used to broadly describe, at a surface level, what it is you're going to hear. And eventually, that genre takes hold in your brain and becomes what you enjoy. Instead of just enjoying music from a pure standpoint, saying, I'm going to have an open mind and I'm going to listen to this thing, regardless of what it sounds like. Maybe I'm going to like it. And the reason why, you know, this doesn't really happen in mainstream music and that people's minds are generally very closed to anything that's not mumble rap or Sabrina Carpenter or something like that, is because the genres are coming first over the art form. And that's the main point of this video. The main rant within this video is that the art form comes last. The genres come first. The marketing is coming before the actual art form is taken into account. So basically we have to talk about, hey, what's the difference between a genre and an art form? Well, I already described the genre as being the marketing tool. That's pretty clear right now. The art form is the actual discipline that you're drawing from. It's the application of musical physics into a tangible form that people can listen to. It's what's required before you can even make a product. So the fact that people are even thinking of musical products before the product is even conceived of is, to me, completely backwards. Basically, the world is backwards. The biggest reason why mainstream music truly sucks in this era is that the marketing comes first before the art form. Now, what do I mean by this? I'll give you some examples here. Actually, I'm going to start off a little bit of an anecdote. You know, I grew up learning music in the mid to late 90s. That's when I first started playing guitar and getting into music myself. And I will admit that I learned music this way. I was completely enamored by any kind of rock music I could get my hands on, right? Whether it was, it started off with like pop punk, because that's what everybody was listening to when I was in school. and learning how to play guitar. And it was easy access. So in that way, you know, it's kind of cool to learn something that's easy to access. But obviously I thirsted for more. As a musician, we tend to thirst for more than we already have. And that should go for any artist, right? Thirsting for more, you know, yearning for something, right? It's almost like I was being fed these genres through the radio. Pop punk, metal, hard rock, you know, new metal at the time was pretty much the new thing. I was being fed all of these genres, but it was almost like my heart and my mind were searching for more. It's like I was yearning for the art. I was yearning for the art form, and that's what it was. So that's my own sort of personal anecdote here. And essentially I'm going to boil it down to a few separate things here, all right? The art form, the actual discipline by which all of the music that we hear comes from, whether it's, you know, machine manufactured garbage or truly great inspired works, basically comes from, I would say, 3 different categories here, okay? And these are art forms, not genres. This is where everything is derived from that we hear and listen, okay? And even these classifications derive from things that happened prior to it. But I think these are some good catch-alls for all of these different ideas. And this is going to make some people mad, all right? Because people are going to be like, well, what about everything else? What about everything else? I'm not talking about everything else, all right? This is my rant. You can get out the door for all I care. You make sure the door doesn't hit you in the rear end on the way out. Actually, do. Make sure it hits you on the rear end on the way out. This is my rant, not yours. But it's basically boiled down to this, people. Classical music, jazz. Oh my God, is he really saying this right now? Yeah, I am. And I also included some Eastern tribal music, or Eastern, like, Sufi drone music, because that is sort of a style that I think of that, you know, when you think of Western music as a whole, especially the music industry all the way up until this point, you know, those are the 3 main catch-alls of all these different styles that have occurred throughout human history, or really the development of music into that era, all right? So you think about all the way back from, like, you know, tribes in Africa, people evolving in Asia, Scandinavia, the drum, right? The drum is like ubiquitous around the world of human development, right? That was one of the first musical inventions, right? Or probably tapping on your leg and screaming at the sky was probably the first form of music, right? And that was passed down orally as an oral tradition. So it wasn't an intellectual type of thing. This wasn't something that was put into writing or really conceptualized. It had to be replicated, you know, all the time. And which is what I'm trying to get you into. I'm trying to get you to replicate this knowledge of the past and then bring it back to the future in your DeLorean, all right? So going back, you know, you can just say these are the catch-alls: classical, jazz, and almost like drone music, right? Improvisational drone music, or raga, you know, tribal screes or chants, right? These are sort of the catch-alls, right? And everything else kind of falls under these giant umbrellas. You can even say the improvisational drone music of the eastern side of things, you know, you could catch that into jazz. Jazz could just absorb that because it basically absorbs almost everything by that point. But improvisation, right, that's a whole nother thing. Now, let's just kind of, and obviously prior to that, the physical manifestation of sound, you know, that's the first thing. That's what you really want to tie yourself to. You want to tie yourself to the physical reality of noise and sound. Understand what a vibration is. Understand what a hertz is. What a scent is, right? Understand all this terminology used to describe natural phenomenon in the real world. Which, by the way, when you play guitar, you're utilizing science. Science is running through your fingertips, okay? Now, here I'm going to get into sort of some lineage here. All right, so let's talk about rock and roll. We're guitar players, right? We love rock and roll. At least most of us do. Maybe not that one new classical guy on YouTube. I don't know what his problem is. I've never clicked on a single video of his because it's all rage bait. I'm not into rage bait. I'm into talking to you one-to-one like a regular human being, okay? Rock and roll. Well, rock and roll is a genre, okay? It's not necessarily an art form, because rock and roll is just a derivation of basically jazz, blues, right? Blues falls under the umbrella of jazz. And blues is like the hallmark of rock and roll from its beginnings, right? Listen to Chuck Berry, basically grandfather of rock and roll, and then anything beyond that, John Lennon, blah, 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 everything that came beyond, rooted in blues music, which is rooted in jazz harmony. Okay, so the art form really it ties back to jazz, which ties back to classical music, but I'm going to use those two as a separate classification here. And the solos being in the pentatonic mode or the pentatonic scale, that's a very Eastern derivation as well. So it's drawing from sort of this East meets West mentality. That's rock and roll. And it is truly unique, but rock and roll itself doesn't really have a sort of like a strict form that it goes by. It was really just used to sell records. It really was. The only thing that separates rock and roll from any other style of music that came beforehand is the loud guitar. That's it. That has nothing to do with the musical composition. All right? So rock and roll, it's a genre, folks. I'm sorry. It is a genre and not necessarily an art form. So although rock and roll is cool, it sort of like blew people's minds open into all these different possibilities and did get people to go back and listen to jazz and classical music, but it's another marketing tool to get you to buy things, or at least it was. Now rock and roll is passé. It's really been diluted. All right, that's another thing. Genres seek to dilute the original source material, right? When rock and roll first started, it was fucking balls to the wall amazing. Chuck Berry talking about getting hanky-panky in the back of a bus from some questionably aged people. Yeah, unfortunately that's rock and roll, but hey, listen, you gotta go back and listen to it and make sure you understand it, alright? It's boogie-woogie to the max, alright? And that's what it started as. Now, going beyond this, right, as the years went by, it became more and more refined. And all that stuff just started to happen. And basically, hold on a sec. I'm terribly sorry, folks. My rant got interrupted because somebody rang my doorbell. They interrupted my extremely important rant for something not important at all. You know those people that just walk around with iPads all day? They got nothing better. They're trying to sell me stuff too. You see? We're inundated with advertising and just crap, pure crap. You can also argue that if you start with the marketing, the product in general suffers with whatever it is, solar, roofing, right? It's like, oh, we're the best in the land, blah, blah, blah. But we just started 2 weeks ago. It's not good. It's not good. All right, anyway, I'm going to continue this rant, all right? Try to remember where I left off. I was talking about rock and roll. You look at it, man, it started from very, wow, okay? Lightning bolt, lightning in a bottle. And it sort of went in waves, where rock and roll became more refined and diluted, not as good. You got a lot of copycat bands that kind of came into the fray that were just, they were riding the wave of success of the genre, right? They were riding a marketing wave, not necessarily totally into the art form. And I'd say this got worse over time, all right? You kind of rode this wave. It's like Chuck Berry, boom, okay, a little bit of refinement, fun, blah, blah. And then the Beatles came in and it's like, okay, we're getting serious here. And then it kind of, during the 70s, you had a lot of bands that started sounding the same that were, some of them pretty decent, but you do have these sort of like copycat bands that come in and just ride the wave of the success of the genre, which seeks to dilute it. It does. It waters it down. The original messaging is totally gone, and that's what you're left with. I would say the 90s, the grunge movement was a big return for rock and roll because glam metal, let's be honest here, There were probably more copycat bands in that era than in any other era. But then again, grunge coming in, totally destroying that. There were a lot of copycat grunge bands as well. All right, and all these different characters trying to mimic Kurt Cobain at the time, right? And then eventually rock music just sort of devolved to where it is today. You have like Breaking Benjamin and like Theory of a Dead Man and all these other bands that just like, they all do the same thing. They don't have any kind of unique contribution to the art form itself. It's all about the genre. That's it. And basically, it's all been funneled into pop music. And I don't mean popular music, I mean pop music. A narrow, rigid, formulaic, four-chord song based on the same stupid crap. Which is like, it's like a surface, like scratching the surface of what is available to you. Alright? When you have like a, this little tiny thing on the top, a little tiny like a little tree, a little shrub on the top, but you're missing an entire forest underground that cannot be seen due to this marketing and watering all this stuff down, watering everything down. That's what's happening. But anyway, that's sort of my rant on rock and roll, right? Being a genre as opposed to an art form, and it eventually did degrade over time, okay? Because the original sort of messaging and the being connected to those forms of art, classical and jazz, right, which all of those guys, well, all those guitar players back in the day had some sort of instruction in that zone, okay? Whether they could read or not, that's the crazy part. It's just being exposed to this music and hearing it. That's all you needed, all right? Now, let's get into, let's talk about the band Black Sabbath. This is a good example of a band that created a genre, but almost everything they play defies the conventions of that genre to begin with, right? Black Sabbath is known to create heavy metal, right? But a majority of the band members, Ozzy Osbourne's a blues singer, okay? Jazz and blues, it just goes back, right? Bill Ward is basically a swing drummer, a jazz drummer, even though there are, straight eighths and swung notes. I mean, listen to his drum fills. He's a friggin' ba 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 da ba da doom da doom da ba da ba boom da ba da ba da ba da. It sounds like, Buddy Rich coming into town, right? It's like, it's jazz. It's jazz music. Geezer Butler, right? Boom 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 boom, right? It's all based in this blues idea, which comes from jazz harmony. Okay, so jazz is the root of it all, people. All right, classical and jazz, we just continuously move back. I also have something funny about punk rock, but I'll probably save that for another video. Punk rock is a paradoxical ethos, right? Because, originally punk rock was about giving the middle finger to the man and the conventions of what I'm talking about, basically. They're talking, we're going to give the middle finger to the art form as a whole. And then pretend they're going against marketing, when really they're just creating a marketing ploy. Right. But the ethos is paradoxical because you can only continue a fuck you attitude of people that preceded you by continuously giving the middle finger to the originators. Right. So the punk rock originators, I guess, didn't realize that down the line people were going to have to say fuck you to them to continue this punk rock ethos. Anyway, I'll save that for another rant, perhaps. But in short, ideal. Good artist first. That equates to a good product. More importantly, a good composition, which then should be given to a good salesman. Not the opposite. You shouldn't have a good salesman trying to create a product and have the art come out of that. Okay? You get out what you put into something. Remember the old adage, garbage in, garbage out? That's exactly what's at play here.